In the Elder Scrolls universe, if you had to be either a werewolf or a vampire, which should you choose to be? What's up guys, it's Sir Thorn here, and welcome to another video game lore discussion video. I do these analysis and discussion videos on a regular basis, so if you'd like to see more of them, hit that subscribe button to stay notified. And if you enjoy my content, please whitelist my channel from your ad blocker, as this channel needs ad revenue to sustain itself. So as we all know, some people in Tamriel can transform into werewolves. Other people are vampires. Well, imagine if you were forced, e.g. as some cruel practical joke from a Daedric prince, to become either a werewolf or a vampire, but you got to choose which one you became. Let's also assume you actually care about innocent people and want to cause as little harm as possible while still maintaining the best quality of life for yourself as possible. Which should you choose to become? Today, I will analyze the pros and cons of each curse and try to decide which is the lesser of two evils. First, let's discuss the most immediately apparent benefits, the powers that each curse conveys onto the afflicted. Werewolves seem to have the greatest powers conveyed onto them. They have increased strength, increased speed, and increased durability. Whereas humans need to wear armor for protection, werewolves are naturally armored. By contrast, a vampire has increased strength, but in Daggerfall, Morrowind, and Skyrim, their increased strength is inferior to that of werewolves. The powers conferred to vampires force those vampires into stealthy lifestyles. They are better at sneaking, they have night vision, they are better at illusion magic. Meanwhile, they are outright harmed by sunlight in most Elder Scrolls games, forcing them to actively avoid the outdoors during the day. Sure, werewolves are harmed by silver weapons, but then again, so are vampires. At least in Tamriel, even if that isn't part of traditional Western fantasy. Overall, whereas werewolves are better equipped to fend off threats, vampires are overall better off if they never have to fight off enemies in the first place, which it could be argued undermines the whole point of receiving such a blessing or curse in the first place. However, the increased power of werewolves is negated somewhat by the fact that they only have increased power whenever they are in werewolf form, whereas vampires retain their strengths and weaknesses 24/7. But then we have the morality of living as either creature. Now, remember that we're speaking purely in terms of in-universe lore. You may have your gameplay preferences, and that's fine. But if you actually lived in Tamriel and had to be inflicted with one of these two curses, which one would result in the least amount of damage to innocent bystanders? Hands down, vampires have a huge edge over werewolves in this department. Whether in Daggerfall, Morrowind, Skyrim, or Elder Scrolls Online, the effects on innocent bystanders are hands down better for the neighbors of vampires than the neighbors of werewolves. In Daggerfall and Morrowind, werewolves have to kill people on a regular basis, otherwise they suffer increasing penalties to their maximum health. In Daggerfall, you can't just kill anyone, you absolutely have to kill an innocent person. That is, a resident of a city rather than an NPC in a dungeon. Vampires, meanwhile, are infamous for sucking blood from other people's necks. However, vampires have two advantages over werewolves in this regard. The first is that the vampires are not forced to drink blood at all. In fact, in every game in the franchise so far, there is actually a strategic benefit to not sucking blood, as going without blood will increase your vampiric powers as well as your weaknesses. Talk about having your cake and eating it too. You get to be uber powerful, and you get to leave innocent people alone. The second advantage is that, even if you do decide to feed on another person, that person is completely unharmed in most games. You cannot confer your own vampirism onto them. Heck, even NPCs can only confer their vampirism onto you through combat, not biting. The NPC you feed on does not appear to suffer any adverse effects from your feeding. Sure, there are plenty of people around Tamriel who treat vampires with open hostility and disgust, but that honestly appears to be more prejudice than rational fear. The relationship between vampires and mortals in Tamriel appears to be commensalistic rather than parasitic. The only exception to this is in Daggerfall. The primitive game engine means there's no actual feeding mechanic. To feed on an enemy's blood, you have to kill that enemy. However, from a moral standpoint, that is still better than the game's version of lycanthropy, since dungeon enemies and even non-humanoid enemies are all viable options for feeding off of blood, whereas Daggerfall werewolves have to kill innocent people. So, if your primary concern is ensuring as few people as possible get hurt from your affliction, vampirism is the way to go, bar none. Now let's discuss your long-term prospects. Which curse offers a better long-term future? Well, with a vampire, you are immortal. You cannot die of natural causes, but you can die of unnatural causes, such as being killed. Werewolves, meanwhile, can of course be killed like a vampire, but they are also entirely mortal. This, however, is offset by the fact that werewolves have an afterlife in Hircine's hunting grounds to look forward to, which is a much better afterlife than Cold Harbor, where vampires' souls go when they die if they cannot manage to stave off being killed indefinitely. However, is vampirism's immortality really that much of an advantage anyway? Whether the fear of vampires is justified or not, it nevertheless exists, and the citizens of Tamriel don't really strike me as the kind of people who would be open to educational seminars and PSAs explaining that vampires are not actually parasites, that the relationship between vampires and mortals is actually commensalistic, not parasitic. The people of Tamriel would probably just throw empty wine bottles at that spokesman and drive him off. Even if you were to go out and find yourself a nice cave where you could live away from society and not bother anybody, chances are that vampire hunters will still find you, because vampire hunters aren't exactly keen on leaving you alone if you leave everyone else alone. Werewolves have a much easier time not being hunted down and killed for the crime of being werewolves. First of all, werewolf hunters exist in Tamriel, but unlike vampire hunters, they seem to occupy a status in Tamrielic society that is indistinguishable from that of common bandits. So they aren't nearly as much of a tangible threat to werewolves as vampire hunters are to vampires. Even in Daggerfall, where werewolf hunters aren't outlaws themselves, they only attack you once a year. Yeah, once a year, not even once a month, just once a year. Second, actually tracking down a werewolf is a lot harder than tracking down a vampire. It's often impossible to tell whether someone is a werewolf unless someone sees them transform. So, werewolf hunters most likely find themselves without work most of the time due to a lack of evidence of prey. Meanwhile, vampires simply cannot pass as mortals. Their fanged teeth and red eyes are dead giveaways. If you're a vampire, everyone knows you're a vampire and there's no two ways about it. Third, in the off chance that werewolf hunters manage to find out that you're a werewolf and track you down despite being outlaws themselves, as mentioned earlier, your beast form is much better suited to fending off attackers in head-to-head combat than a vampire's powers. This is especially the case in Skyrim's and Elder Scrolls Online's version of lycanthropy, when the beast form can be invoked at will, so you don't have to wait patiently for nightfall before you can kick someone's ass. So ultimately, I have to give the nod to werewolves in this case. So for one last thing to analyze, let's look at the ease of accessibility of the cure. Sure, in universe, if you had the option in this hypothetical scenario to cure yourself, that kind of undermines the whole point of this conundrum in the first place, but just for the sake of completion, let's discuss it. In nearly every game in the franchise, the cure for vampirism is usually hidden behind cryptic riddles and misinformation. In Oblivion, in order to start the vampire cure quest, you have to ask one specific person about the cure. In Morrowind, nobody outright tells you how to cure your vampirism. You have to read books about vampirism, learn that it comes from Molag Bal, and connect the dots on your own that you have to seek Molag Bal's help to get cured. Meanwhile, in Daggerfall, the cure for vampirism is so cryptic that not even the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages provides a straightforward explanation of how to obtain it. No, seriously, the section that discusses the cure for vampirism only discusses what happens to the player and his faction memberships after they've been cured. Okay, so how do I do it? By contrast, figuring out how to cure your lycanthropy is practically a walk in the park. In Daggerfall, you know those werewolf hunters who hunt you down once a year? They actually send you a letter before they attack you, demanding you either cure your lycanthropy or they'll attack, and give you instructions on how to do the former. Yeah, in Daggerfall, the source of the cure is literally handed to you. Sure, in Skyrim, finding the source of the cure is a bit more cryptic, but the implication there is that the one guy who wants to cure his lycanthropy is too old to pursue it himself, and his younger, more able-bodied friends don't really give a rat's ass. However, while it might be easier to figure out how to cure lycanthropy than vampirism, the roles are reversed when it comes to actually curing it. For vampirism, figuring out how to cure yourself is a cryptic puzzle, and actually administering the cure is the easy part. In Oblivion, only one witch in the entire game knows how to make the cure for vampirism, but once you have it, curing yourself is as easy as drinking a potion. In Skyrim, only one man knows how to cure vampirism, but once you find that guy, actually getting cured is literally just a simple matter of standing around and doing nothing while that wizard says a bunch of words. The cure for lycanthropy, on the other hand, is easy to find out about, but a lot harder to actually get. In Skyrim, when you throw a Glenmoral witch's head into the fire at Ysgramor's tomb, you're cured of lycanthropy, except you have to fight off your former beast spirit in a fight to the death. You can't just get cured and then walk away. In-universe, that can be seen as a huge deterrent to pursuing the cure, knowing that your own lycanthropy would burst from your body and possibly kill you instead. Meanwhile, in Morrowind, curing your lycanthropy requires you kill an innocent Nord and steal her heart to use in the ritual, which kind of undermines the whole reason you're looking to cure your lycanthropy in the first place. Hell, at least in Morrowind you can kill bandits and that will stave off the lycanthropy health penalty, but curing your lycanthropy requires you spill innocent blood, and that's just backwards. So, as far as the cure is concerned, speaking entirely in-universe, it seems that lycanthropy and vampirism are evenly matched. One is easier to find out about, but the other is easier to actually do. So, I'm at a loss. The two curses seem evenly matched. Which one should you choose to be if you have to choose to be one or the other? Well, why don't I let you decide? Cast your vote now. Remember that this is a purely in-universe consideration. We can all have our gameplay preferences, but in-universe, which curse do you consider to be the lesser of two evils? In the meantime, however, I am Acer Thorn, and I will see you guys later.